Thank you. And Pamela, Jamil just talked there earlier about the value of higher education helping you move on to employment. But isn't part of the problem that there's a massive pent-up demand from employers for particular skills that they don't see as being a focus of higher education today? So how do you adapt widening access and success approaches to meet those demands?
No, thank you very much, Brendan. And again, good afternoon to everyone. And thank you for the opportunity to be part of this very important discussion. No, you're right, Brendan. It really indeed is part of the challenge. And I would frame it a bit differently, especially given the South African context as a case in point, where the issue is not simply that higher education is failing to produce the skills that employers need, but rather that it's that we're trying to widen access and success in a society that's marked with, deep inequalities, while simultaneously responding to a rapidly changing, labor market. So the South African paradox, for instance, is that on one hand, we have the highest rate of youth unemployment, and especially unemployed graduates. But on the other hand, employers consistently report a shortage of critical skills, especially in areas like in engineering, digital technologies, health sciences, renewable energy, advanced manufacturing, data analytics. And this suggests to us that the challenge is not access alone, but access to relevant, future-oriented education that translates to meaningful opportunities. So widening access cannot simply mean bringing more students into the system. It should mean enabling students, particularly those from low-income backgrounds, to enter programs that are responsive to societal and economic needs and to succeed in those programs. So while I might have said that, it doesn't mean that we are avoiding, we shouldn't avoid creating that false sense of choice between employability and the broader purpose of higher education. I think it's very important to always keep focused on the fact that universities must produce graduates who possess not only technical skills, but also critical thinking, intellectual curiosity, adaptability, and ability to solve complex problems. And so in terms of the programs that we offer, we have to make sure that those attributes which the employers also increasingly value in the era of technological disruptions and uncertainty are embedded in our programs.
What are the biggest challenges to accessing higher education in your country? Please fill in the options that you think are the biggest challenges. Now, the current context is it also includes the impact of the rapid use of AI throughout society and in higher education. The rapid impact use of AI is having on teaching, learning, and employment. So what can universities do to ensure that AI helps reduce rather than deepen education inequality? Pamela, perhaps you could start on that one.
I think for me, the first principle is that AI must be treated as a public good rather than a privilege for the few, because we know it has the potential either to democratize learning or to reinforce existing divides. So we cannot assume, firstly, that all students have equal access to devices, connectivity, or digital literacy. And that's really our reality, for instance, within the South African context. So if AI tools are available only to those with resources, they do tend to deepen educational inequality. So there's an opportunity for universities, government, and industry to work together to ensure equitable access to digital infrastructure and to affordable connectivity and AI-enabled learning platforms. I've got, for instance, a few examples where within my institution, we have such partnerships. for instance, in terms of affordable connectivity through bursary fundings for students, that a part of the component for that funding, even from the National Student Skills Financial Aid Scheme, that part of the funding and the allowances are really directed at making sure the students have got the devices and have got affordable connectivity through our interactions with industry role players. So we also focus on AI literacy for all, and I think that's very important, and not just to take it for granted that everybody would know what regulates, what are there policies that regulate ethical use of AI. I know we're still struggling with that. I mean, even at my institution, we just have some guidelines. We've tried at national level to even have some policy kind of, regulating the use of AI and responsibly, and also tools to critically evaluate AI-generated content. But AI literacy should become a foundational competency, just like digital literacy. In my context, for instance, in the previous decades was also very much a competency that was encouraged by different role players. We saw this also during COVID, especially, where there was an increased demand for access to digital technology and literacy. And this is not just for students in our context, it's also for our staff members being equipped with just at least general knowledge in terms of how AI can, be useful in terms of efficient and effective learning, how it can enhance personalized learning, for instance, for students who enter universities underprepared. We have opportunities for AI-powered tutoring for those students and the use of adapting learning systems, language translation tools. We live in a very multilingual also environment where, academic literacy and writing would sometimes need translations. Then you would have, such tools to help students who are struggling, and they would get then targeted support, especially in the context where a number of our students are first generation university entrants. And so these kind of technologies and the fast pace at which they develop and demand that the students are ready and are able to adapt, or even the staff members, they can be used as powerful enablers for success rather than, barriers. So we do promote at least, getting to know about the pros and cons of, of using AI, but also where access is, becomes a problem. I mean, we've seen examples, for instance, with ChatGPT, for instance, where, you can only eventually access more of within the tool when you subscribe, and how much that is in dollars for some of the, backgrounds, within my background. But it's how then as universities we put together to at least work on making sure that we use stimulus licenses and so on. Ultimately, the question whether AI will transform higher education, I think it's clear it already has. The main question really is whether we will harness AI in a way that advances in all of that social justice and inclusion, because we have both the opportunity and obligation to ensure that AI becomes a tool for expanding opportunity and reducing inequality, and empowering students and staff to operate meaningfully or participate meaningfully in the knowledge economy.
Pamela, perhaps you can tell us a bit about something related there. You're about progressive needs-based policies in your institution, and also the how you work with industry and how the National Skills Fund supports access for key disciplines.
I think my university really draws very largely from the government policy-driven type of initiatives, like the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, which started off like in the early 90s, really as more as a loan system, and just about 8 years ago has become more direct bursary student funding for low-income students. So, for instance, my institution, about 76% of students rely on that National Student Financial Aid Scheme. And across the country, I mean, we've got just over 50% of students from low-income communities that rely on that. But over and above that, of course, we have these very strong industry partnerships and with philanthropies and private. But again, another national, policy kind of driven initiative that helps students at least, close that gap from high school to university or post-school education sector to the world of work, is through the sector education and training authority kind of entities, which were put together under the National Skills Development Act around 1998. So it's been around for quite a long time. And they're sector specific, like there would be, they're called SETAs, Sector Education Training and Authority Entities. There would be one for agriculture, for instance, or there'd be one for manufacturing. So, and the recruitment would start really from, once the graduates, once students are at university, so they would support students in forms of bursaries, but then also for unemployed youth, they would be supported through learnerships until they are able to, and they would be collecting, for instance, stackable micro credentials, which is what it's called now. But at that time, it's just really different certificates, and there would be a recognition of prior learning as part of that. And I've seen in the in the questions, there's some questions already talking to micro credentials, which is something we've just started looking at a more strategic high level within universities. But there is those nationally driven policy support that we've relied on, including that National Skills Fund that you were talking about, that also looks at students who are already in the world of work, or people who want to improve in terms of their education or professional continuous development while in the world of work. So those are some of the examples, but really in terms of industry support and some of the initiatives that we've worked with, it hasn't just been only local industry. Sometimes it would be international industry that's in South Africa. Like, for instance, we've got the Samsung Campus Initiative that we work with, Samsung South Africa, with IBM research entity within South Africa, where we connect really to just make sure that there is continuous learning and access provided over and above what we are able to provide as universities. So these collaborative partnerships really are the ones that have made quite a difference in terms of providing students with opportunities. Where we're big on in my institution is the work integrated learning, or WIL program, where we're able to place about 99.9%, at a 99.9% rate, we are able to place students in industry for work integrated learning. And then just over half of those are usually absorbed back then into those workplaces that gave them the opportunities for work integrated learning. So those are a kind of the preparedness programs that starts early for when students finish, then they're at least secured in terms of jobs once they finish universities. So those are some of the kind of either national policy-driven and also university institutional kind of initiatives. And and international partnerships. I'm sure Jamil will tell you more. I think in his book as well, there is an example of the MasterCard Foundation and the work that they've done, especially within the African continent, and including in South Africa, where really there are multiple partners, but also multiple kind of focus on different, types of students, from students with disability to refugee students being afforded opportunities to study in other countries. And so we work with them also closely, including the Chris Gere Foundation funded student success program at undergraduate level. It's called Siyaphumelela, which really is also meant to encourage access to all types of students. And then there are categories that we define where we will prioritize, for instance, students from rural areas, or female students in STEM subjects, because they don't have that easy access to STEM subjects. So it's those kind of initiatives that we make sure we look out for in terms of potential partnerships to just enable students to have equity of access, but also retention, because the type of what's contained within the programs, like for instance, the Siyaphumelela, is just also making sure that once we have students on board, that we also retain them. The academic support programs are there. We've got information in terms of data analytics, in terms of how they are doing, the early detection systems, alert systems, in terms of how they are performing. And so even the projects within that are designed to make sure that students finish in record time and there is continuous kind of academic progression. And I think where we need to strengthen that even more is more on the national driven kind of national policy driven programs, because it's so far very much about numbers, how many students you were able to get into the system, but not so much about the quality of outcomes. And this is where now we are working in terms of just strengthening those kind of initiatives.
What is the latest thinking on when and how financial support makes the greatest differences to access and success, and on how can universities use admissions, partnerships, and flexible pathways to open up higher education to a broader range of learners and ensure their success?
I think I can't reiterate enough that no university or post-school education institution can solve the whole issues of access and success challenges alone, and how important collaborations, partnerships are in terms of that. And for us, even in terms of the funding support then that I mentioned earlier, I mean, that has been really instrumental in terms of, supporting access to higher education. The partnerships that, recognize really that seamless support from, high school to higher education and to the world of work, and exposing students to flexible learning opportunities throughout, even within the world of work. So for examples, we have joint degree or dual degree programs that we have started really exploring, where you would have a three-party kind of partnership with a university here in South Africa, ourselves, with our partner, an international partner in Germany, and another local university. But where we are still struggling is about making sure that the student gets registered at one university, but has got opportunities to get their credits from the different universities, and then graduate back at the university where they registered, because our systems are not quite ready. While they encourage those kinds of collaborations that come with funding, for the students, because that's one of the the kind of multifaceted way of making sure that there is access, but also funding and exposure for the students in terms of the pathways that they're able to access. So some of the flexible pathways, learning pathways for that we've used. I mentioned recognition of prior learning, which is not as clear cut as it always sounds, because they have to look at if it's been a working student, somebody that's been working, or somebody that has accumulated, different, qualifications, or and having to then have a committee. That's what we would have, committees on campus, specific committees that would have the academics as well as industry role players that would then vet at what level that kind of recognition of prior learning would have to be set at. So that's another way of, a kind of flexible pathways. We saw some discussions also on in the Q&A around stackable micro-credentials, which is something we are also still exploring, but we haven't really quite found our way around it, and we're trying to learn from our partners because it's something that seems to be also favored or suggested quite often by the world of work, by industry, because they want a quick turnaround. They want people that can come and work and learn and have access to work place-based learning opportunities, but get qualifications for that in the partnership that they have with us as universities. So it's still at beginning stages, and a lot I think that needs to be strengthened is very much from the quality assurance bodies and the accreditation bodies. While they may encourage that we start engaging in terms of those opportunities, but it's also then when it comes to the recognition of of the programs in terms of accreditation and how long it takes, and which of the partners then would, for instance, get the student to at which institution would they register and which one would they graduate, and you have to come with those different options when applying for accreditation. I don't have many examples in terms of that, but we do work very closely with schools now, just taking it back to undergraduate level in terms of making sure that there's access for students, especially from rural communities, and that there is funding. So we partner with funders whose focus area is very much around, for instance, students from rural area. And I think I mentioned also before, also prioritizing female students in programs where we know there's been a lack of participation by female students. So I think at the end of the day, it's just really for me, the success of higher education depending very much on the ability of institutions to be able to support that seamless movement between school, work and further study, as well as professional development. We have short learning programs in between that also I use it for professional development in the workplace. But it's really how in terms of that seamless movement, there's support for each one of those stages, and that there are partnerships that work effectively. Yes, thank you so much. I was also writing that I need to leave in about 5 minutes time. I hope it's okay. But I also really have been covered a lot by Roberta, because the first thought that came into my mind was about the Asian, University for Women, and what instrumental role that has played in terms of, women in giving opportunities to women in the region, but also giving an example really from the history of South Africa, where I also grew up in the time where legislated segregation and discrimination and barriers to access to higher education were quite prominent. And what helped people like me was around really those scholarships, international kind of agencies that were promoting education in countries that have got those kind of legislations that cause barriers. So it's about really getting information around what kind of developmental agencies exist that promote education. And it, unfortunately, it does tend to be they have to take the people away to outside the country. And you hope then that they are going to come back and build the country themselves. And I'm one of those that had that kind of opportunity and had to leave the country and came back, to be part of the change. So it is possible. It's about just getting that information and I'm sure the World Bank has got wealth of information in terms of that. Thank you.